Good afternoon. We are going to resume and we'll speak now about sustainable cities. There are so many people connected who are following us online. We couldn't welcome you all here, but there are so many participants online for this fifth edition of Emerging Valley. And now we will co-partner with Euroméditerranée, and we will speak about Africa renewing its urban dynamics for thanks to digital innovation and agility. So today with us we have many distinguished speakers, among which Aïssatou Djiba Diallo, the head of FinTech Relations at EcoBank. We will have also a speaker from Veolia, and we will speak with the French ambassador in South Africa, who will join us online. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you, Samir. Thank you, Samir Nelkrim, who founded Emerging Valleys. I would like to thank all our partners who co-organized this summit, who wants to promote partnership between Africa and Europe. And thank you for welcoming us in Marseille. Samir has told us about all the distinguished guests who will take the floor. So today and now we will answer this question: how can Africa renew its urban dynamics taking advantage of digital technologies, innovation and agility? What do we need to advance on today's topic? Today we will speak about African cities and thereby enter a world where the informal sector is dominant, which is not the case in Europe. So here are some figures. The informal sector accounts for 25 to 65% of African countries' GDP. 30 to 90% of African jobs are in the informal sector, and by 2030 there will be more people in African cities than in rural areas on the continent. And there are consequences, or assets really. Populations can easily adjust. Their locals are resilient, but there are also challenges, governance challenges for authorities in the cities, because they have to provide collective services and they should provide enough services for everyone. So they need to find alternative and innovative forms of management. We can see on the ground that digital technologies can be an asset, because they proved they could make the informal sector an environment in which we can live. And it can also offer us levers for investment. And now I will turn towards Hugues Parant. He knows what it is like to rethink city dynamics by observing the cities in the south. Can you tell us more about it? First of all, let me thank everyone in this room, as well as all the participants following us online. And now we will talk about cities. From the first day, we have always supported emerging valleys. We want to support Africa, and we know that Africa has high needs of restructuring. Africa needs restructuring in urban areas. The value produced through digital technologies. And I have met African startups who had reached great achievements in Africa, and we came to Europe to find new markets, while the potential was all on the African continent. That's why we decided to support Emerging Valley and to tackle this topic, the topic of urban dynamics, through this kind of session. The question of cities and of urban areas been tackled here from another perspective, from the perspective of the informal sector. Since there was the Industrial Revolution, there has been a urban renewal in Europe thanks to Haussmann, and we are trying to avoid everything that is informal, because in the 19th century here we destroyed the informal dimension of cities for many reasons. And that's not that long ago, The West, as well as the US, wanted to give more structure to urban areas, and that's what happened in Beijing not long ago. The small villages were taken away, although they were quite pretty. So I think there's a dynamics will come to Africa too, and over the past 40 years it has been put into question. So now let me talk about my second point. So there has been a lot of rural exodus in the 80s, in the 90s in Africa, and it has a demographic situation that is unprecedented. So it means that there's a lot of young people, a lot of creativity. They have made a great progress in the digital area, and then this population growth is connected to rural exodus. It is due to the demographic situation of Africa as well as to the climate change. And very soon, all African cities, the population will double. So the main threat faced by Africa is urban chaos. However, there is something else. There is something new in Africa. That is technology. Technology can reach people wherever they are. Tech can tackle many hurdles. And this is a continent that has a lot of smartphones, a lot of networks, and we can reach so many people through technology, many more than ever. So we have this great resource. We should take advantage of it to turn the informal African city into a new city that will produce value and creativity as well as exchanges. Africa will soon need to organize its informal cities, and it will do so thanks to technologies. And while Africa does this, in Europe we have tried to destroy any informal sector. And here in Marseille, 2 or 3 years ago, we launched MOVE. We restructure neighborhoods, and we set up informal structures in these newly structured areas so that we can foster and boost economy. So we don't want to boost accommodation, because it is still formal accommodation. We cannot match with informal accommodation, but these spaces are dedicated to people who want to share and create. So that's what we did in Marseille. It's called MOVE, and this happens in all Western cities. It is called transitory urbanism. It has been really often thought and imagined as something temporary. But as you know, in Marseille, a large part of the population comes from Africa. So we want to make There's a transitory spaces permanent. And these spaces can offer a lot of value. What do you use? What are your assets to set up this project? So setting up this project in Marseille, this has already been done. So we just want to make these temporary spaces permanent now. It is quite hard to understand. So some small startups can come back, set up within communities so that they can offer different human relations within communities. So in Africa, on which we have a lot of expertise, a major expertise, so if we have to work with African stakeholders, so we are working with African partners, and it shows that we have needed a lot of years. We have worked for many years to recognize that European urbanism exists in France, which means that we can understand the context in which we live. This is crucial. So we do not want to set up a Euromed everywhere in Africa, but if you take any city, there are different levels: urbanism, informal accommodation, young people, and the communication skills of locals. So if we take all these assets, we can adjust any model. We did it in Marseille, we can do it in Dakar or in Abidjan. We can do it anywhere, because there's not only one urban Africa, there are many urban Africas which depend on their respective local context. The context is not the same in Cotonou or in Rwanda. So we need to understand what's going on the ground. We need to make our long-term project sustainable, and we need to give the priority to people. That's what we did here. It seems mainly ambivalent, but if you go to some African cities now, there are cities that are really structured with really structured city centers, and these city centers now host informal accommodation. So we won't get rid of informal accommodation in Africa. We just need to work with it. You're right. It is true that in Africa, areas that were occupied by Europeans are really structured, whereas areas where there has always been indigenous people are a little bit more informal. And so in northern Africa, there are medinas, but in Dakar, there's also a medina. And you can see the influence. There was under the influence of the of bigger cities. And now I would like to turn towards Marie-Thérèse Lagarninja from Veolia. I think that Veolia raises many challenges for the informal sector. So when you work on the ground, how do you combine the operations, the informal dimension, as well as all the rest? Thank you for asking me these questions. You might think indeed that the informal sector will have an adverse impact on our activities, and I won't deny it. But we're here talking about an informal dimension. It doesn't mean informal doesn't mean irrational. And it is a different rationale we need. well, different from what we think in France. So we provide services, we provide essential services, that is access, we provide access to water, to wastewater, to waste management, and we offer all the services that contribute to the economic development and the well-being of locals. And we are trying to set up new approaches for Africa. This is my job. We need to set up more decentralized and mobile units. As you said, we see neighborhoods that are developing, that are becoming super neighborhoods, and we don't know why it's happening. You know Dakar, I was born there, I grew up there. I grew up in a neighborhood that used to be a residential area with no multiple story. And now it was only residential, and now it is the business district. And now we plan basic access to services such as water. So it is quite a complex task. But what if we set up neighborhoods that could adjust to the city's evolution? So that's the first thing I wanted to say. Secondly, I would like to give you another example of this informal world that is much more structured than what we think. It is a pilot project we set up in Ghana. I love this project because it shows everything we can do, and it shows that we are striving to understand people. So this project is called Ripaton. It is a startup. It was created by a young man from Ghana. He grew up in Switzerland. He has had successful studies. He worked for BlackRock. He is not he doesn't lack structure. And at some point in time, he felt the need to do something meaningful. And he heard about plastic recycling. So he wondered how he could help solve this issue. Nowadays, plastic is recycled through a very informal network. So there's a young man contacted this network. He also collected an ex-waste collector who recruited waste collection workers, and they came back with plastics that will be processed in Ghana and resold on the PET market here in Africa and Europe. So this plastic is extremely well tracked, and this project is really strong on ethics. This man wanted and managed to show that if you work with the informal sector, you can collect waste. So at first, he collected 10,000 tons, and now it is 9 times more. He wanted to create a factory in Ghana to create some plastics beads. So what he wants to do is to turn plastic into small bits of plastic and start a whole cycle of plastic recycling without injecting new plastic within the loop. So this is one of many examples that shows that the informal sector has more value than what it seems. Does it have any social justification? Did this young man explain his project from the social viewpoint? We understood, and that's why we should work with the informal sector, because the informal sector can be scary at first. So yes, we work with the informal sector, but the informal sector brings together people who have a different vision of time. For them, it's a day-to-day business. They're here to work and make sure they can provide for their family. So what they need are solutions that will make their day-to-day, their life more safe on the economic point of view. So that's how we can have a social impact. So you just gave us an example of working with informal sector. So can we say that it is just working around red tape, getting rid of red tape? Well, not exactly. They are. So I talked about red tapes. I was referring to the administration. There are no layers. There are no. They want to avoid any extra costs. But what they're looking for, and what they want is transparency. Informal workers believe in trustful relationships, which can be only based on transparency. And digital technologies meet these trust challenges because you can know when or how you will get paid, and I know when you will need to pay me. So I know you will pay me. So that's really important because there's a lot of corruption. Yes, I know when and how much you're going to pay me. And I do think that digital technologies can really boost transparency, bring transparency in all transactions. So there's a whole mechanism put in place all behind it. And what about financial informal structures? The personal, individual dimension is important. What I mean is that it involves people coming from the same neighborhoods, from the same origin. So do you think that the informal sector depends on this proximity, on these groups, and so shouldn't we actually focus on these aspects to find digital solutions? I can't generalize on this topic, but what I can say is that collectors are locals. So they know what they're looking for, they know where they should look for it and why they should go where they go. So they have their own trusted circle, and it is a pyramid-like trust structure.
Thank you very much, Marie-Thérèse. And now we will listen to Jérémy Perlet, Expertise France, and comes from long experience in the French Development Agency where he was. And what methodology have you set up to better adapt to this informal environment, to handle it globally, but also in its great diversity? Well, in terms of the informal sector, it was said that it's a major issue. 40% of the African live there with all of the topics that they with lack of connectivity to a certain number of networks, and big gaps in equality as well in terms of social media, etc. So this whole environment here where the cooperation and development agencies work on and Expertise France, as a technical international cooperation agency, does, and cooperation, tries to mobilize expertise throughout the world to support and strengthen public and local elements. And on the 1st of January, the group, in a few days' time, hence, it was born in 1941, 2nd of December, with the General de Gaulle that created this fund. So we are an agency that is much more recent, of course, that takes advantage of this major network of the AFD, which is the French Development Agency, the FDA, which was created by General de Gaulle on the 2nd of December 1941. And so how to handle this topic of the informal sectors? For me, there are three dimensions that were relevant. So first of all, to use use digital aspects and how to use it in an urban environment, and how to use digital technology in their daily work or the perception of their financial resources, because of course, when you talk about local funding, and of course you can have better perception with more transparency existing, and better financial means as well locally to develop these various neighborhoods, and to work on territorial planification or town planning, and how to use topics that will mobilize on these in this area, the Mediterranean, for example. And so the second dimension would be how to mobilize digital tech so that the inhabitants of these informal neighborhoods, how can they appropriate it for themselves and have it become their own demands and needs for these services. And so with the FDA, the French Development Agency, they work with mobilizing these local stakeholders and players to foster local development and good appropriation of this development through urban nurseries that have been set up in Abidjan or Ayer or elsewhere in Dakar. And the third dimension, very important indeed, is that of creating businesses in these informal areas or neighborhoods. We have here at Emerging Valley today are very lucky to have about 30 representatives of the various startups arising from these two programs. To innovate, and the other one is for the diaspora and creating businesses for Africa, Meet Africa. And so we have businesses that create value regarding the urban areas and digital virtual as well. Now, waste management, recycling. I spoke with a businessman who recycles the masks to create different types of plastics, and then use things for schools, and then water access as well. It's very structured with very complex networks. We know that in the informal neighborhoods, accessing water will be very different in terms of quantity, etc., but also to enhance the resources that we have. And of course, a lot of that's energy, and then resources, where these entrepreneurs can find quicker and more agile, easier to use solutions. And of course, in terms of planning, I am not opposed to these neighborhoods taking advantage of or benefiting from these structures that are well structured in these informal areas. And so there's question of equality and these basic public services and supply grids, etc. That exist, but they should be able to access these. But this will take time. Of course, we're talking throughout a continent, and so this will happen through urbanization and town planning and a lot of infrastructure. But of course, the public departments will always be at the source of this. They will be at the basis of that, and so. For creating these services thanks to entrepreneurship. Thank you very much, Jérémy Pellet. And now we will talk to Asatou Djiba Diallo, who normally should be here through video conference. Can we see her? I think she hears us. Yes, I do. I hear you very well. Yes, good afternoon, ma'am. Asatou Djiba Diallo was, of course, has dealt with the stakeholders in the informal sector and how to take into account these specific demands in such a contrasted continent as Africa. Good afternoon, everyone. I do hope you all hear me well. Well, yes. Maybe I should take my mic off. Well, actually, we hear you very well. Yes, I hope that you hear me. Yes, we hear you very well. Fine. Thank you. As you said, my name is Asatou Djiba Diallo, and I am the director of the FinTech Relations for the EcoBank Group that works in more than 30 countries in Africa, but also in France, England, Dubai, China, and soon in other countries as well. And we would like to be the Pan-African bank par excellence. And before I answer the question of what we are looking at in terms of solutions in the informal sector and with what we experience on a daily basis, but I would like to just touch on the African context, which is very specific, and this informal sector here, and not only has Africa been the continent of the informal sector, but also in banking, because this is one of the weakest covered in terms of banks and financial transactions. It's the lowest in the world, and most of it was done informally until 2007, where was PSA that opened up the mobile wallets on the continent with absolutely extraordinary adoption and adaptation of this. So we picked it up as no one else in the world has done, and so it really is a leader in this area and in the area of fintech. So financial technology, and in sub-Saharan Africa, we detain more than 50% of all mobile wallets in the world, and every month $13 billion are transacted via these mobile wallets. And so we use the technology, and we can go from a very informal area to an extremely formal area. We jumped from one to the other. And I work for a bank, but I do take the risk of saying, unfortunately, the banks have come into Africa, unfortunately, with unadapted, not well adapted systems in terms of banking. And so this technology linked with finance, we saw that there was a huge section of the population that could use it. And so all the potential was already there. So informal, it depends. it depends on what we take as a model. I wouldn't say that there's informal sector in Africa. I would say we often want to do cut and paste and just do exactly the same way on the continent as the world does elsewhere. And so this mobile wallet is the proof of what I am saying. Last week we had the report on the amounts raised. We $5 billion, and we're going to go beyond that very quickly. And every year funds are raised in huge amounts, and so I'm very pleased personally to be able to work in this area because I see an enormous amounts of young entrepreneurs that work in this area, and they're just so glad to be able to do and have funds that they can get in this way throughout the continent. And so, of course, there's huge appetite of the African populations to use this in the area of finances. So about 5 years ago, we set up a plan where we digitalized banks to a maximum, and we set up express accounts and placed them at the service of the people. That was like the equivalent of a mobile wallet, and it has been in existence for the past few years throughout the continent. And we went even further than this, and we set up a partnership with the companies, fintech companies and communications companies, to find solutions for credit scoring. I don't know how to say that in French, but they provide solutions to give financial background, for example, to companies that don't have financial history to base themselves on, and depending on financial flow that they can generate, and they can see whether they're eligible to see if they can actually contract that loan. And so the experiment was extremely good, very good results. And I would also like to bring up the example of a mother that's usually sitting at the end of the street in African cities that we see at a table where she sells peanuts or vegetables. And when we have we did an analysis and did some testing when we had companies that worked with us, like Mobile Wallet and other systems of the same sort. And so we went to these women, and we realized that they went very early in the morning to the market. They bought their goods and came back at 6 a.m. in order to sell their goods. And actually, they can do it if they have a minimum of capital to be able to buy the goods that they're going to sell. And also, we were able to have, little mini loans of 15 euros, 20 euros that they could borrow just to go and buy those goods and then sell them at the table on the corner of the street. And so these are little projects that we worked in terms of at the EcoBank. And also something else that's very important for the bank is we have bank patrol, because we really understood that the fintech financial technologies are used that have to be well adapted for the population to use. And so we at the Bank have set up a platform, secure space, where various companies that work in finance can come online and log in and do digital payments and orders and take money out and withdraw money without really having a bank account. And this is a project that we started up a year ago, and we do wish to continue on along these lines so that the African population can use our expertise over the 40 years that we have been on the continent and use other infrastructure to offer digital services to the African population. Thank you very much, Madame Assatou Diabadialo. And now we will ask Marie-Thérèse Laguerre, because we are moving ahead. I don't know if You can hear me? Yes, I can hear you. Yes, fine. I was saying that to Isaac Lambayo is that one thing we see at the post office, and how do you link up this with the post office with digital? I mean, what does that mean in Africa? Thank you. Thank you very much. I suppose you can hear me. Yes, yes, we hear you very well. And you have 8 minutes. Yes. Now, I was listening uh, to these informal, the topic of informal sectors, and so of course it was interesting to hear that you were, working with the post offices, because as soon as we talk about post office, we think of distribution of parcels and letters, and so here we systematically kind of cheated because we have actually stuck the informal sector onto the classical sector, which is postal delivery. And so here in Africa, we have the informal sector is a huge opportunity for us to reinvent what we call the transformation of this huge block that's called the public service sector. And of course, we have to ensure the social link between the society and the state. So for me, the post office in the midst of an informal sector is a huge opportunity to grasp because Africans have learned to live together as a community. Well, of course, a certain number of things are missing, but still a number of aspects that can be pulled together for the community is always bien. Of course, technology or digital technology for me is an opportunity to send solutions to the various communities. And the major advantage of digital is that we can impact the lives of different communities and address various communities. And so we look at the informal sector as, on the contrary, has enabled us to, in the end, because we're in an informal environment, the post office has to be be considered as a huge national startup, but it should become a huge multi-tech institution. And so you're seeing we are actually designing technology around the Uber spirit, Airbnb as well, and mindset, and with the with the electronic mapping as well, and GPS, and etc. And so mobile, and plus logistics. So when you're firm like the post office, you have to grasp a certain opportunities so that you can create an ecosystem that will enable distribution and delivery to be properly executed. So to answer your question, it's a wonderful opportunity so that the post office can reinvent itself, but on continuing its traditional activity. But in terms of digital work, you could say, wow, they were able to work with all of these digital or fintech stakeholders, and of course geolocalization, digital mapping, etc., should enable us and the digital solution to facilitate the daily lives of the citizens. Thank you very much. And now I think that we're going to have to look at see a video of Laurelie Le Chevalier, who is ambassador of France in South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Samir Adelkrim, cher Hugues Parant, dear Jérémy Pellet, cher Félix Adam, Dear Asati Jibala Diallo, I thank you very much for your invitation to this plenary session on sustainable cities. And I'm very pleased to share some of my ideas with you. Last year, there was a resilient city issues were launched, and of course the expansion of urban poles and they're cut off, and it has been even worsened with the COVID-19 virus. So cities nourish innovation, and so it really gives space to talent, incubators, nurseries, etc., and helps social inclusion. Chimelorong in South Africa has enabled several startups to be thrust forward and be launched. And it's in Johannesburg that the talent and creativity and resources exist for transforming these cities. And transforming cities is a major issue. How can it be a crossroads for innovation? And of course we have to support and help accentuate all of these good innovative projects. And Marseille is an emblematic case where the city can be a place of creation and innovation thanks to entrepreneurship. And so because of this is what you should be talking about, and I know that you're all very engaged towards this. And at the other end of the world, here in South Africa, we're looking with much interest to the Mediterranean, because our cities are faced with the same issues and challenges, and it's thanks to entrepreneurship that it can become an inclusive city and innovative. And I thank Euromediterranean that really works towards urban innovation. And I know that in Marseille and the two shores of the Mediterranean with all of the startups, and I know that France is at the heart of a lot of these projects. A lot of Made Innovant programs and a lot of major groups and small and tiny industries as well all help for the city of Tamara, and we have to jump right in order to make all of these dynamics work. And I wish you good work. Thank you very much, Ambassador, sir. And we see how all of this informal sector is a vast project, and all of the Hugues Parant will now talk about the lessons he has drawn from this. Well, yes, first of all, I don't think it's a conclusion, because this topic has just started. You know, this type of symposium, you know, we don't say bidonville, or we don't say ghettos anymore. It's because everything's changed. The words have changed. The values have changed. And so if we talk about informal sector, it's different from what it was before. It was so negative. It was, you know, for the town planners, they wanted to make it not exist anymore, and so they had to use a lot of imagination for it to come back, even in places like Marseille. So it's not in this type of a conclusion that we're going to end the debate. No, it's just starting up, actually. And so what I have heard here is that economy and town planning and the informal sector is really you know, rampant in Africa, and so that we can't do much about it, actually, because in second we have to take it in its context. And also in the Western world, for centuries it's been like a negative value. We have to switch and make it into a positive value. And so if we accept deing things as they should be, saying that the informal sector is an African reality and that we have to actually support it, to give guidance and help it, then we have to see how the people see and how they want to build their cities and their own lives. If there are contributions that haven't really been I haven't ever heard talk about the African city, about talking about African cities. You know, it's only just bringing water and electricity into the cities. I've never heard them talk about African cities being the bearers of such projects and innovators. And so they all work with their souvenirs and their memories of villages. And so how can we create space for them and have their inhabitants and these neighborhoods? How can, the entrepreneurs, how can we make it into a formal sector? And so how can all of these very well administered cities, how come they don't produce the same values as societies who don't have those? And so we have to be able to compose with the two extreme situations. And so one is with discussions like ours now, today. And so the seed that we planted in Marseille and the innumerable seeds that we're planting in Africa, of course, are sorts of spokesmen for African innovation, are speaking and showing us. But sometimes, it's almost shameful. Well, yes, it's informal sector. We mustn't talk about it. Yes, you must. And we must work on it and to better organize ourselves so that we can even be inspired by this and then contribute all we can. And how can we preserve this soul and this mindset so that we can have an urban type of sector in 20 years in Africa? Thank you. Thank you very much to our panelists. And as we said, it's not really the end of the discussion, it's just the beginning.